Hey everyone, it's DeagleBeagle. So today we're going to look at unnecessary stab moves on Pokemon, or Pokemon that don't normally use a certain stab move because they may only use one of their stab moves. So I don't know of any Pokemon that has only one type and doesn't tend to use their only stab move. There might be a few that do that are just set up Pokemon, but that's extremely rare. Okay, so you'll see most Pokemon. We'll go through this list, but I'm going to even type it out. So the general trend is um, almost all Pokemon use use stab moves for every partial type they have. So very few um, Pokemon use either no stab move or only one stab move. Okay. In fact, some Pokemon run more than one stab move for that same type. For example, they might run Heat Wave and Overheat. And here's an example for this one of the first point. I need to move this up. The first point is Annihilate. For example, Ape uses both Drain Punch and Rage Fist. And an example for this one might be, I don't even know of a Pokemon because it would be like not top tier, but let's just say like Body Press, um, Iron Head, Bronzong maybe, uh, might with Trick Room and some other BS move and who knows what else. Trick Room, and even this would probably have like Gyro Ball or something, but I suppose you could use EQ with a weakness policy ally or whatever. Okay, but most Pokemon are not like that. Um, Usually the ones that use no stab move are the ones that either get a really good move pull where they get better opportunities than a stab move, but that's very rare because stab boosts it by 50%, or they do some sort of setup thing, or both. So you look at this and you just see stuff like Amoonguss. Yeah, it only tends to use one stab move, but I'd say like 90% of the Pokemon, or 80%, use both stab moves. Probably more like 90 something percent, actually. So IH, by the way, is for Ironhead. This is because I originally made this PowerPoint because I was thinking, do I really need Ironhead with King Ambit? And the answer is maybe, but not necessarily, I think, because like what does it offer that its other moves don't have? Like you might be super affected by I'm gonna even write that down. Some mons don't run more, don't need more than one stab move, be, because by that I include dual typing, even if dual typing, because its other moves offer significant coverage, or its second stab move doesn't offer very much additional coverage. So, for example, King Ambit or some other Pokemon King Ambit's Iron Head. Or they're mostly setup Pokemon. Yeah, I already said that, like Amoonguss or whatever. It's kind of like a setup Pokemon, even though it's not a stat boosting one typically. And I've never really seen that. And Ironhead does more to things that resist dark, so you'll keep seeing Ironhead IH everywhere. And some Pokemon that don't need a stab move, I would say your Dragapult, because like Phantom Force is so sucky with it taking 2 turns that I don't know if I would even use it. You can use Shadow Ball on the special set. Dragonite, it doesn't tend to use its flying stab, but more commonly now people are trying to use it because they see how valuable it is for its stab and maybe its coverage. So they might use like Terra. Some use Terra flying though, because Aerial Ace is just too weak. I don't know why it doesn't get an 80 power move. If it did, people wouldn't use Terra Blast. They'd just use that with it, and you would see it on almost every Dragonite. And even though it doesn't offer a ton of coverage, it has more power than its alternative moves. So if you just hit neutral, it'll do more. If they like resist normal, but if they resist normal though, typically they're gonna also they might resist flying, but not necessarily if they're ghost or whatever. And normal, it's in its stab, but you can Terra type to it, so it depends. And then Flesh Ender, I don't think you should probably use a fire type attacking move, because if you are, you should be using Talonflame instead. If you're using Flesh Ender, it's more for like Roost and Will-O-Wisp and whatnot, and survivability. And Farrig Giraffe, it often doesn't use Hyper Voice. If it may use Hyper Voice, if it does, it probably uses Throat Spray. But in my opinion, I don't prefer that one because I tried it out, and yes, it does raise your special attack, but I think with setup Pokemon like that, all you're really trying to do for the most part is get Trick Room set up. Once Trick Room is set up, that's the main like headache that's gone. It's like, Trick Room set up, and you don't have to worry about basically auto losing versus a team that's all faster. So in my opinion, I would use Citrus or something to keep it alive and not make it offensive. Why would you make a Pokemon that's trying to set up Trick Room, desperately trying to set up Trick Room, more offensive when you need like it to be as reliable as possible for getting that Trick Room up? So that's why I don't prefer that. And a lot of other people stop running it too, because you can just run Terra Fairy and use Dazzling Gleam for like kind of like a second stab move. And even if it's not stab, if you don't Terra Fairy, it'll still probably do about as much or even more than Hyper Voice, because Hyper Voice doesn't super affect anything like Dazzling Gleam does. And Dazzling Gleam might super affect them 4 times even, versus like Rory Moon or something. And Flutter Mane, Ironhead would do more to that, but it's so bulky, or it's so not bulky in defense that wouldn't even necessarily matter. And it might have Sash or something anyways. Gallade, all these Pokemon wouldn't really matter, except like Garganacl, you might want Ironhead on King Ambit if you're trying to hit that harder. And Gastrodon may or may not use a water move like Muddy Water. It might just use like Ice Beam, even though I think Muddy Water would be a good move. It's not a bad move, or not. I was gonna say Scald. It used to use that, but you would probably have to use Muddy Water. And what else? Ironhead is good for some of these Pokemon, but not most of them. And you can always use like Steel with another ally. So on my hard Trick Room team, I dropped Ironhead with King Ambit because I'm like, I don't need it. And I already have Iron Head. Sorry, I already have Heavy Slam with Iron Hands. So it's like, why do I need another steel move? I don't. I need like a fighting move, like Brick Break for screens or low kick even. And Sucker, I wanted a second dark move too, because I wanted Sucker Punch in the back for when Trick Room wears off, I have something to hit them with, or even while Trick Room's set up, if they have priority, hopefully I can outspeed their priority and Sucker Punch them first. So I think it's really good to have priority on a Trick Room team, and I was using King Ambit because there's so much Intimidate going around and Snarl and Struggle Bug. I'm like, I gotta check this somehow, man. I'm tired of getting screwed over by stuff like that. And Iron Moth is one of those. Did I skip something? Oh, Gyarados. It doesn't typically use its flying stab unless you Terra flying with it. So I wouldn't expect to see a lot of usage out of that because you have to Terra it and you might have to Terra with something else, and a lot of people don't even use Terra flying with Gyarados. And then, even though probably half or barely most do, and ground's common too, and Iron Head does more to Iron Jugulus and Hatterene, unless they Terra like fire or something to resist it. That's why I'm running Terra Fire on Hatterene for more survivability. Iron Moth doesn't typically need a poison move, but it typically runs one though. Like it typically uses either Acid Spray or Sludge Wave for now while people are still trying to figure everything out. Because Acid Spray is actually a really decent move. Even though I don't know if Iron Moth is the best Pokemon for it because it's not super bulky. But it does have 40 power at least. You can kind of use it for some damage and try to finish off the next turn and avoid the citrus. So Iron Head is good versus a few more Pokemon. But see, as you can see, the Pokemon where it's typically better for on King Ambit, it's like you could versus Meowscarada, it's gonna be Sash Fragile anyway, so you could probably just Brick Break it and do about the same thing, barely less damage than that, and not barely. Well, actually, would do more than that. Is not needed if you use a fighting move, unless they Terra Grass. Maybe that's overcomplicating things, but it's true. King Ambit may not use Iron Head sometimes because it doesn't often need it, and DDF doesn't tend to use Hyper Voice. Almost nobody uses that. So, yeah. And where was I? What comes after Pelipper? Oh, Pincursion. I gotta make this bigger a little bit. Okay, Pincursion. No. The Pokemon that don't use their stab are Roaring Moon. Sometimes doesn't use a dragon move. I'd say probably barely most of the time, actually. I was seeing like almost no dragon move, no Scale Shot, no Dragon Claw. They're just content with using like Throat Chop, or some of them might run a dragon move if they're using like Dragon Dance or something, or they're using Loaded Dice with Scale Shot, but most use like Acrobatics and Throat Chop with it. And Sableye doesn't tend to use a ghost move. It doesn't really have a need for it when dark moves tend to be better with like Snarl or Foul Play. And what other Pokemon doesn't use a stab move? Spiritomb is kind of in the same boat as Sableye, as the same typing, and it's better to usually just use a dark move instead. Iron Head would be good against Sylveon and Tyranitar, even though a fighting move would do more if they don't Terra. but they can tear flying. So in some instances, you might want to Iron Head, knowing that it'll finish them off even if they tear flying, unlike a fighting move, for example. So yeah, some actually don't run Bug Buzz. They run they run Quiver Dance, Protect, Giga Drain, Heat Wave. So I'd say actually most don't. I'd say actually most don't run it. If they're running a support Volcarona though, they will probably use Bug Buzz. Like mine, I would use like Overheat, Bug Buzz, Rage Powder, and Protect or Flamethrower or whatever. So it just depends. So thanks for watching the unnecessary stab moves video. Stay tuned for the next one.